Now, most people don't know what a kubbestol is. And kubbe, that means the same as a short log. When I cut a tree, I cut the log 40 inches long. Now that would be called kubbe. Stol means the same as chair. So translating it, you could call it log chair. Now in Norway, some call kubbestol a tub chair. But I just hate to call a chair that you spend 100 to 200 hours on, carving it elaborately with scroll designs and beautiful mountain scenes into it, with log cabin and church in the background, with the Viking ship and with the ocean on it. And I also carve sceneries like Stavkirke on it, and the Julenis, I carved them into the backs of the chairs. And so I prefer to call these log chairs kubbestol rather than calling them tub chairs. Basswood trees that I carve the kubbestols from are not very often found along a highway. You have to go way back from the highways, where it's mainly inaccessible with trucks. So that we have to use tractors a lot of the time to get in there after I found the trees. And finding the trees, that can take all the way from, for a 1 year supply, that can take from a week up to 2 weeks to find enough trees. And that may involve several farms before I find enough trees for that. I love nature, and wandering to the woods, up one bluff and down the other one, up this valley and down another one, is most fascinating, I think, because occasionally 2 or 3 deer will jump up startled from me. Or a squirrel will sit on a branch scolding me for invading his territory. And it's really fun. And then at a distance, I notice a basswood tree that looks beautiful. Oh, this must be it. I walk up to it and find that lightning has been there ahead of me and cracked it so it's cracked from top to bottom. Or it may have frost damage, so I can't use it. Then I go to another tree, same results. I may go to a half a dozen trees sometimes before I find a tree that is just it, that is perfect for kubbestols. Then, after finding enough trees, I tell my 2 son-in-laws, ask my 2 son-in-laws if they can come and help me cut it. And they go with me, and we cut the tree, and we cut the logs into 40-inch lengths. And for a year's supply, why, we generally cut from 20 up to 30 logs. Saturdays, preferably, weekends when my son-in-laws don't work, why they come and help peel the bark of the logs while I'm busy using a chainsaw, shaping the curvatures of a chair. This is the roughening out process, we call it. First, after they've peeled the bark of it, then I hurriedly draw the shape of a chair with a crayon. And then I take the chainsaw and cut the angles. in the high mountain regions, a lot of the people there couldn't afford buying chairs. So simplest way to save money, they go into the woods and try and find a tree with a hollow stem or trunk. And they'd cut a log out of it and cut the seat into it to sit in. And that way the chair didn't cost them more than just the time and labor put into it. And the richer people and the more well-to-do would sometimes hire an artist to carve designs into them. Father's farm was only 80 acres, and it's unthinkable in this day and age to make a living on just 80 acres. So Father and I, this was in 1933 then, after I had completed the art course, Father and I came into a discussion. What shall we do to add extra income to our farm? Dad said, wouldn't it be wise if we put up a small art exhibit building and charged a small admission? And I said, that's a wonderful idea. Then we could both join our talents. You could display your work and I could display mine, and why don't we try it? But this was during the hard Depression days, back in the 1932-33, and where to find the money. But somehow, where there's a will, there's a way always. And we scraped together $200 and built as an art exhibit building, 14 feet wide, 22 feet long. And to economize as much as possible, we made the cement floor only 2 inches thick, you know, where we should have made it at least 6 inches thick, and that way. Then what to put in there? Well, Dad had some Cuba stools, and he had a carved table, very ornamentally carved around with scrolls, and then sheep heads for legs on each corner. And he carved a ferry ship, a ferry sailing on a maple leaf. Oh, he carved also well, they call them groutspun. Now, translating that into English would be something like pudding box or some highly digestible food that usually was carried to people in Norway that were bedridden and not feeling so well. A neighbor would carry this to another neighbor. And then I thought of this idea, why not make an enormous bust of Lincoln? So I built one down to about here, showing the upper part, blue granite for the coat, and I smashed those boulders then into small pieces, and I fitted those pieces onto the main body of Lincoln and fastened them on with wet concrete, pasted them on. For the shirt, I found a white flint rock in the bluffs around here. That made a white shirt for him. And for his hair, I had to hunt days and upon end to find enough low-grade iron ore around here for his hair and for his beard, and also for his bow tie. I made an addition to our exhibit, modeling life-size busts of father and mother, that is shaping white Portland cement or white concrete in the wet state into life-size busts of them. And the neighbors around here said that they were very lifelike. And, well, we announced that the exhibit is open, and the first day there came 100 people, which is unusual out here as far from the highways as we were, and we were very elated and tickled about this beginning, you know. And we charged only 10 cents admission. And then I leave the chair, about 3 to 4 inches thick, that is, in the roughening process. And then I store these roughened out chairs in the barn or in our basement for slow seasoning, which takes from half a year up to sometimes a year. And they have to be watched very carefully during this time. If they dry too fast, they have to be watered down. You see, the problem was this. We had the exhibit going for about 15 years, but it didn't bring the sufficient income. We did have 2,000 to 3,000 people coming here every summer, and despite making my own souvenirs and that, the income wasn't sufficient, so I decided to work in a plastics factory in Winona, and I worked there for 7 years. Then one day, Dr. Alf Gunderson came to visit us, and he said, "Halvor, this is sad that you, with your talents, wasting your time in a plastics factory, mixing plastics that other people can just as well mix as you. Why don't you go back to woodcarving?" "Yeah, but I can't see any way of doing it," I said, "because for one thing, I have to get orders, and how will I get orders?" "Oh, if you'll go along with me, I'll help you," he said. I'll place an order right now for 1 kubestol, and while you're working on that one, I'll see if I can find more orders for you." So I hadn't barely gotten started on that one chair. Then there came a letter in the mail directing me that, telling me that he had found orders for 9 more kubestols for me. And he gave me the names and addresses of the various people that wanted them. And I feel very grateful to Dr. Alf Gunderson, who is a doctor at the La Crosse Lutheran Hospital or Clinic, and he's done wonders for me to get the ball rolling and get my name out or publicized, so I started getting orders. I've lived at Highland Prairie all my life, and I can't think of any place on earth that I would more rather live than here, because I've gotten acquainted with the neighbors, and they're very fine neighbors. And I have a lot of friends around here. Now their day's work is ended. The most ambitious endeavor I've ever attempted so far, carving faces, is the carving that I donated to the Highland Prairie Lutheran Church. I have it hanging there at the present time in a narthex. My wife and family were shocked when I came home and told them I had promised to do this carving for them. My wife told me that before you start now, Halvor, be sure that you carve the 12 disciples first, so you gain the experience in carving faces. Well, I agreed half-heartedly to that, but starting out, I didn't dare but carve Christ first, because I knew if I started carving all the apostles first, and I should fail with one of them, I would have to throw all of it. So I carved Christ first. And carving anything like Christ and the apostles, why I didn't spare at all on prayers, asking God to help me and helping me guide my hand in perfecting this work. And later I found out that my wife had been equally busy, and I guess the rest of my family. Pastor Leavdahl and his wife came here often. They were very interested in seeing the progress as I went along. Oftentimes I'd wake up at night between 2 or 4 in the morning, and I'd get up in my pajamas and start carving with a perfectly fresh mind, and I was then able to see mistakes that I was not able to see at day when I was, towards evening when I was tired. And I'd make a lot of corrections and improvements then. The carving is, if I recall correctly, about 3 feet high by 5.5 feet long. And the congregation was so happy about it all that they installed special lighting over it, 3 lights in fact, to get the proper lighting and shadow effects into it. After a half a year or 3/4 year of seasoning, I take the chairs out out in our yard and thin them down with a chainsaw. The next step then is to sand them down very smoothly to proper size and thickness. Then I draw the designs on. My designs are generally on tracing paper that I transfer onto them with tracing or carbon paper. Father, who came from Norway then, immigrated to this country in 1884. He brought with him ideas of the Scandinavian arts and culture, mainly kubbeståls. And at first I copied his ideas and designs as faithfully as I could, but after having gained confidence in myself, I now go much further outfield in designing my own ideas. I try as far as possible to originate ideas that are still within the Scandinavian framework or culture. Then after all the designs are put on, I route out the areas in between the designs in the scrolls. This I don't consider art at all, this part of it. I just route out excess wood fast. Then in between the router, of course, doesn't always leave smooth surfaces, so I use small sanding sanders then that I sand in between to smoothen it down, and I use an electric drill for this purpose and small sanders I attach. Now all this is not what I consider real art. This is the process of getting the chair ready to where I consider the real art or the real skill begins. Then I get my carving tools ready, and here's where I do the fine chiseling and carving out using gauges and cutting in the very detailed work. As a young boy, I was fascinated by watching Father carve kubbeståls and other carvings. And watching him, I picked up ideas here and there, how to handle the tools, various carving tools and so forth. And so Father said, this really isn't as difficult as you may imagine it. He said, see here, he said, here's a carving tool. You just try it on this portion of a chair now. I don't care if it's perfect, because I'll make the corrections. Well, I tried, and I just couldn't make a go off it. And Father said, well, don't feel discouraged, he said, because this isn't learned in just a short time. This will take years, but keep on. And so I learned little by little the techniques of handling the tools. Art flourishes best in a home where there is perfect happiness and harmony between all members. As an illustration of what I mean, I have my workshop in the basement. We call it a cubby hole. That's about what it is. It's a dark corner, electrically lit, and I have my various wood carving tools and apparatuses there. But midwinter it can be quite cold down there and uncomfortable. So I quite often ask my wife, may I carve in the kitchen today? It's so cold down the basement. Why, sure, she says, but be sure you sit somewhere where you won't be in my way when I do my baking. So then we have a joyous time. I carve and we listen to the radio and we visit. I visit with my wife and we exchange the latest news. And it works out real nice that way. After completing the kubbeståls, and they are ready for the finish, I turn that job generally over to my wife. She is considerably better than I am in putting finishes on chairs. The reason for it, I believe, is she is a little more patient than I am. After having spent 100 up to 200 hours on a chair, you do really become attached to it. And it is sort of saddening to see the owner or the one buying it carry it out the door and carrying it to his car and loading it. You do become attached to it.
Halvor Landsverk, Woodcarver. Was produced by Media Resources, University of Minnesota Continuing Education and Extension, and made possible in part by a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities.